Good afternoon. Several weeks ago, we started a national tour around the issue of justice and the expansion of the Supreme Court. In light of the court's clear political and partisan leanings, the efforts is not partisan on our part. The efforts is to protect the human and civil rights of American citizens. It is clear that at different times in American history that there was adjustments to those numbers in the court. So for those that say you have to keep 9 in the court, that is not true based on history. Martin Luther King III and Andrea Waters King and I were in Chapel Hill, North Carolina on the tour this week. And they came to New York. National Action Network is now supported. I've been supportive individually before this. And we have some of our partners in this pursuit of justice that are going to address us at this time because this is we feel that the country is in a constitutional crisis at this juncture, the way this court is set. What happened with the Dobbs decision, what happened in terms of women's right to choose, we still do not know what's going to happen to affirmative action. There's also another voting rights case, and we have a court that a literal third of the court, 3 of the 9 members of the court, a third of the court was chosen by the most bigoted president in American history, Donald Trump. It shows how we can and must hold our courts where it is accountable for what is right and fair. May we hear first from the respected and regarded congressman of this district, our home congressman, Congressman Adriano Espia.
Thank you, Reverend Sharpton. Thank you all assembled here. You know, often when constituencies don't get what they deserve through the legislature or the executive branch, the Constitution has allowed for a third rail for folks to try to get justice in. And if you look at the history of constitutional law, stare decisis, you'll see that a lot of the wrongs that have been corrected have occurred in the Supreme Court. Amongst them, Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954, reversing Plessy versus Ferguson, the separate but equal theory of segregation and hatred bigotry. And so the Supreme Court today has the lowest approval rating in recorded history. 3 out of 5 Americans don't feel that the court is doing the right thing. They disapprove of the Supreme Court. This has been fueled by a series of scandals headed by Clarence Thomas and the others that have chosen the Supreme Court as a way to get preferential treatment, gifts, travel, lobsters, other kinds of meals. And of course, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Because in this Supreme Court, you've seen them gut the EPA's authority from the Clean Water Act. You're seeing them strike against labor rights, labor unions. You saw the now infamous Dobbs case, a woman's right to choose. And we have other cases in the horizon that are critical to our well-being as a nation and to our communities in particular. So this court has been adjusted, the number of its members, 7 times, Reverend Sharpton, in the past. 7 times. The last time, back in 1869, it was at 9 members. And we had back then 9 federal circuits. Now we have 13. And so the call is to expand the court to 13. To cleanse the court of its evil philosophy and allow it to base its decisions on fairness, empathy, to do away with the hijacking of the court by the radical right. And so we ask you to do that. I am a co-sponsor of the legislation that proposes to do that. But it starts right here in our neighborhoods. It starts in every corner, in every street of every neighborhood, of every borough of this great city, and cities across the nation and states across this nation, to make this fundamental change to a path that was given to those that felt they had no voice. When the legislature turned their backs on them, when the mayors and the governors and the presidents did them wrong, they at least had a hope, Harden. They at least had that hope, that beacon of hope that they can go to the Supreme Court and get it done then. But the cards are now stacked against them. And as such, we must do everything we can to bring back the court. Let's take it to 13 with your help. God bless you and keep the faith. Happy UT.
Congressman Esbiat, now we bring you an activist extraordinaire, the second highest official in city government, the public advocate of New York, Zamani Williams.
Peace and blessings, love and light. House of Justice, how you doing today? I want to thank Reverend Sharpton for allowing us to be here and all my colleagues who are here. I also want to thank the Congressman for having the courage to put this forth. It takes a lot of courage to put this forth, and that's important. It is interesting because sometimes during our lifetimes, we will think just because this is the way something happens, is the way it has to happen. Just because something's been this way means that's how it's got to be. But that's not true. As mentioned, the Supreme Court has changed 7 times. So this is not something crazy pie in the sky. This has happened. This ain't happened in our lifetime. And it's important to understand the purpose and the reason this is really important. The Supreme Court, although it has taken time to do things, has been the one place that at least tried to push this country to do indeed what it says it does. So the country has tried to say at various times that it is equal, it is about equality, it is about equity, it is about everyone having an opportunity. But that has not been the case. And when people were aggrieved, when people were struggling with those issues, they said, let's go to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court has at least began to push toward equity, push toward equality, push toward these things. And now we've lost that ability. We now have lost it through extreme conservative thought and corruption in the Supreme Court. So where are people supposed to go to get reprieve when they need it? Now, well, I think they made one right decision. Maybe it was last week with the voter rights. But in order for that to happen, the sky was on fire. We don't want the sky to be on fire every time you got to make a right decision. There is this is the first time in our history the Supreme Court is taking away people's rights. We have gone there to make sure rights were put on, and they are now taking that away. We are in a dangerous space and time in our country. We have struggled with these issues and these questions since the inception of this country. Everybody knows this country was designed to assist particular folks. The Supreme Court is now trying to go back to a time where legally the people who could be most privileged were cisgender, straight, wealthy, white men. Everybody else was supposed to support that. And through case after case, the Supreme Court has said, no, we are going to do what we say we are and provide rights to everybody. Everybody. Because the minute you say except one, everybody's in danger. And so now, for the first time, they're reversing those rights, taking away the rights of women, taking away the rights of labor. They will be going after affirmative action. They will be going after marriage equality. They might be going after interracial marriage. They're going to go a whole bunch of crazy places.
Taking us back to Dred Scott, brother.
So we have to do what we have to do to provide the protections for my newborn daughter. For all of our children. We have to remember the people that came before us. The grandmothers who have no name, the ones who had no education, but said, I have to get into the streets for my children and my children's children. I have to remember the enslaved person who is my family, who I don't even know who they are, who reached out and said, I am enduring this because I am dreaming of you to continue the fight. And that's what we have to remember. It is our time now to do what we have to do to protect our children and protect our future. From race to gender to just the world existing, as they don't care how we get rich, or I don't care how some people get rich, as they destroy the planet. We need this protection. We need it now. Let's pack the court. Let's get the 13, not because of just pure politics. I don't even really want to look at the numbers of people who support the Supreme Court or not. We should look at what's happening to people. What is happening to people who are suffering simply because the Supreme Court wants to take their rights away? We can't let that happen. And the best place to have that jump start is the House of Justice. Thank you so much.
We are now blessed, as many of you know, on August 26th, we're having the National March on Washington. One of the planks will be this. And down through the years, when Martin Luther and I organized it, there was one woman that has always stood as a gallant warrior for the rights of women and the rights of everyone, and would stand with us in any fight for justice. We're honored to have her join us today here at the House of Justice, my friend and sister, Cecile Richards.
Thank you so much, Reverend. I always know I'm in the right place if I'm in the place with Reverend Al Sharpton, so thank you. It's great to be here. We are here today, as has been said, because the Supreme Court is no longer a source of justice in the United States of America. Women have had their most fundamental rights stripped away by the Supreme Court, and frankly, we are living in fear of just what may be next. So, nearly 1 year ago today, 5 judges on the Supreme Court overturned nearly 50 years of the right to make our own decisions about pregnancy. A decision that for most of us may be the most personal we make in our lifetime. Now, I think it's important to know we didn't lose this right because it was no longer important. In fact, the right to make decisions about pregnancy has allowed many women to go to finish school, to have a career, to raise a family when and if they chose. We didn't lose this right because the American people changed their mind. In fact, support for the right to legal abortion has never been stronger in America. We lost this right because 5 members of the Supreme Court, 3 of them were put on by Donald Trump and jammed through by Republicans in the United States Senate. They decided that their own moral, political, and religious views were more important than the health and well-being of women in America. And the good news is the political backlash has been severe and it has been immediate. but the personal toll on women has been enraging. In state after state, voters have overwhelmingly reaffirmed their desire to live in a country that respects this most basic freedom, and yet this Supreme Court thinks they're above the will of America. Women across the country are being denied life-saving medical care just because of the Dobbs decision, doctors being threatened with jail, and it is no longer safe to be a pregnant person in the United States of America. My home state of Texas, women continue to come forward, including Amanda Zarowski. Amanda was only able to receive an emergency abortion after she went into septic shock. And now, of course, it's unclear if she'll ever be able to have a healthy pregnancy or a child in the future. And this is 100% because of the Dobbs decision. This Supreme Court is holding America hostage. And we know, and it was mentioned earlier, we know that from Justice Thomas's own opinion in the Dobbs decision, that the freedom to make decisions about our pregnancy is just the beginning. He actually wants to revisit other long-standing American rights, the right to marry, the right to contraception, and more. This cannot stand. Every part of our democracy is at stake. Our right to control our bodies, our right to be safe from rampant gun violence, our right to vote and have fair representation, and our right to have elections that absolutely reflect the will of the voters. This court is tainted by unethical behavior, from the lack of financial disclosure to Justice Thomas's own wife's involvement in efforts to overturn a democratic election in the United States of America. It's beyond time to reform the court so that we can restore the faith of the American people and advance justice and equality, and that's why we're here today. We need to restore balance to the Supreme Court, including expanding the court. We need a binding code of ethics for the Supreme Court of the United States. And look, this is not a tomorrow thing. This is a today thing. Because people's lives are at stake, women's lives are at stake, and the time to act is now. Thanks very much.
Now we want to hear from our fighting state Senator Jessica Raymond.
All right, buenas tardes. I'm New York State Senator Jessica Ramos from Queens, just across the river, and I wanted to be here this morning because here in the House of Justice, this conversation is most pertinent. You know, throughout my life as a New Yorker, I have seen how the National Action Network, and now the Just Majority, and such a wide coalition of organizations and of people, of human beings who are yearning for equality and for fairness before our courts, fight every day to change our laws, to improve who goes on our bench so that we are treated like the human beings we are. You know, here in New York, we have done a lot over the past few years, not only to protect workers, and I say that as the chair of the Labor Committee in the State Senate, but also for bail reform, to ensure that people are getting a speedy trial, so that they do get the due process they deserve, so that women can have a say over what happens with their bodies. But unfortunately, none of that would matter if we continue to have a court that sees us as second-class citizens, as somehow less deserving than the white property owners who established this country. And so I wanted to be here to push for a 13th Supreme Court justice because we need it now. The last time there was a huge push to expand the court was when FDR was pushing for a New Deal back in the early 40s. And it was only the threat of expanding that court that actually allowed him to put forth a bunch of the programs and worker protections, the minimum wage, you name it, that we enjoy today. Only the threat of expanding the court was able to achieve that. And so now when we're fighting against climate change, when we're fighting for each other in every which way, to expand the court, and this time it can't only be a threat. This time, the threat must be carried out. This time, we need to expand the court and ensure that not only we have a 13th, but hopefully that person is also reflective of our community. That Supreme Court justice joins Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, joins Sonia Sotomayor, joins all of the other justices who are rightfully doing the work to protect us. Now at this critical juncture. You know, like Jumani, I'm a mom too. We're parents. We're raising kids in New York at a time where we're worried. We're worried about the future that we're leaving our children. So having a court that actually does protect fairness, does stand up for justice, is going to protect the human rights of each and every human being, no matter who they are or where they come from, is one of the biggest fights of our lifetime. Thanks for being here. Happy Father's Day and happy Juneteenth.
Last but not least, a real warrior who has in many ways framed the argument about criminal justice in Albany.
That's right.
She comes from the fighting community of Brownsville that produced Mike Tyson and Al Sharpton, but one of us is still the champion. Sammy Woman, Latrice Walker.
I was also sharing, Rev, with Ms. Richards that Brownsville is also the home of the first women's clinic, the Margaret Sanger Clinic. So we began the fight regarding reproductive rights in the communities of Brownsville. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. It is a pleasure to be back here in the House of Justice. It's where I'm able to sort of flex my muscles and not have to worry about what somebody said she said when she mentioned on the floor that we need to remove the Confederate flag from the second floor war room of the New York State Capitol. Yes, she said that. And it was in the context, of course, of a speech as we were ending session and we were talking about clean slate, and though we weren't talking necessarily about any flags or about the Civil War, I utilized this as an opportunity, just like judges use each and every day when they're on the bench in their opinions and they're exercising judicial advocacy. And they utilize this term judicial advocacy in order to go beyond the confines of the law, in order to get a decision and to set precedent about things that are happening in politics that they just don't like. And so I, just like them, utilize this as an opportunity to put forth what we call in the law dicta. And it's not necessarily a legal binding opinion, but just as we heard where Justice Thomas can say things like we need to look at the right to marry, or we need to look at all of these other laws, even though the underlying case had nothing to do with the type of political activism that he was exercising in that circumstance. And so we've heard a lot about why we need to expand the court to 13. And so what I'm going to talk a little bit about is fairness, justice, equity, and integrity within our court system, because this is a critical time in American history where we know that our rights are under attack. As the chair of election law, of course, we are watching voting rights happen, aggressions and grievances against voting rights all across the country, from Alabama to the state of New York. We are versioning on a process where we may even have another opportunity to rewrite and to redraw the congressional lines where, again, judicial advocacy was utilized in order to undermine us having a Democratic leader in the House of Representatives and none other than Hakeem Jeffries, but yet to draw lines that are majority of another party in order to undo all of the gains that we have received But just like they utilize the law in that case as a sword, we will continue to push for a court with ethics and who upholds the indications of ethics so that it will always be a shield for the rights of individuals in the country and as well as in the state of New York, because having a bench without accountability is like not having a bench at all. The allegations that are swirling around Justice Thomas right now have raised some very important questions about conduct, and we need to have a binding code of conduct. If federal judges and lower level judges are bound by a code of ethics, then why not men and women who sit on the highest court of the land being held to the very same standards that we all are? Right now, the American public has very little faith in the integrity of the court, according to many polls. We need to have confidence that billionaire mega donors like Harlan Crow are not providing lavish trips to Justice Thomas for the sole purpose of influencing the court. The Supreme Court should not be for sale, but in reality, it has been going on for decades without a mountain of similar allegations against globe-trotting Justice Antonin Scalia. In 2015, former Justice Stephen Breyer refused to recuse himself from an energy case in which his wife owed more than $30,000 in stock in a company that was involved in the case. Justice William Douglas attended President Franklin Roosevelt's poker parties. Justice Abe Fortas became the first justice to resign back in 1969 after he got caught taking a secret retainer of $20,000 a year for life from a Wall Street financier. So this kind of behavior is not new. It's been going on for a long time, and we know that the time for accountability is overdue, be they liberal, moderate, or conservative. I also believe that Congress has to consider term limits for our justices. This would be a way to ensure that politics of the court more closely resemble the politics of the American people, and it will prevent justices from retiring only at times when they are likely to be replaced by an incoming justice with the same ideological leanings. Do we really need Donald Trump's appointees for the rest of our lives? Hell no. Oh, I could go on, but at this point, I am going to turn the podium back over to my leader. And as one of the things I love that he says, I'm going to turn the mic back over to Hoosa Never Had It. Reverend Sharpton.
Give a hand now, panel today. Come on, give it to me. All right, we thank you for the Justice Group, and we are going to end here. Make sure at 5 p.m. Eastern Time you watch Politics Nation with Al Sharpton, and we'll have Senator Raphael Warnock and Congressman Adriana Espaillat is on today. It is Jamani Williams' favorite TV show. Thank you.